Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhudale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Satya Deshatadine.
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. No audio. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji got disconnected. Can you connect back?
Okay. All right.
Yes, Prabhuji, you can see.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Snapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Tadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham
Vandeham Shri Guru Sri
Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Shri Rupam Sakritam
Hare Krishna.
Pradamyate
We are unable to hear Prabhuji.
Gope Kanta Radha
Radha Kanta Namastute
Dr. Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe
Radhe
Vrindavani
Vrindavaneshwari
Vishakano Sute
Sute
Devi
Devi
Namami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Can you hear?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can hear now. But earlier it was breaking a lot, Prabhuji.
Okay. Now it's okay?
Yes, now it's fine, Prabhuji.
Okay. Okay, so we can begin with yesterday's questions.
Yes, Prabhuji. Just a minute, I'll post the questions. I'm posting the questions, Prabhuji. I've posted the first question posed by Harikshetra, Prabhuji.
Okay. In Shloka 20, the language appears that there is one soul in all the bodies. No, see, you see the purport, what Prabhupada is writing in the purport to text 20. So he says, a person who sees one spirit soul in every living being. So he's not referring to the supreme super soul.
I'm not able to get that this one. It appears like Mayavad kind of this one. So how we should understand? It's qualitatively one kind
See,
of.
if we try to analyze things on our own, then one can come to so many conclusions and so many understandings. Therefore, we have to take help of the Acharya's commentaries. So, so therefore, one spirit soul means that the quality of spirit soul is same, isn't it? That is the meaning.
Okay.
All spirit souls are Sachidananda.
Hmm.
So that is the meaning of one undivided spiritual nature. Of course, Mayavadis want to interpret in their own way, they can do it. But then we have to see the meaning given by the acharyas. So the basic understanding is that even though it appears divided, but then it is the same spiritual nature. That is the basic meaning. The same spiritual nature. Therefore, it said, Bhavam Avyayam. Bhavam, the nature. The nature is the same. Sachidananda nature. And that's what you see Prabhupada further down the purport also. He says that to see one superior nature, that living force in every body, is to see in the mode of goodness. That living energy is imperishable, although the bodies are perishable. So differences are perceived in terms of the body because there are many forms of material existence. So that's the understanding.
Okay, Bhu.
All right?
Yes, Bhu.
And just one second. Where's the next question?
Right after that, Prabhuji, from Nishant Prabhu. I have posted it in 18.37.
Okay. Following rules and regulations like poison, how one can persist and continue. Yes. So therefore, we require the association of devotees to get that encouragement and inspiration. So therefore, we need the association of devotees, and we need guidance from seniors. So that's the reason the entire process of devotional service is required as given by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. So then when we see that other devotees, everyone has their own challenges and everyone is struggling, and we are not the only ones. So that's how we get inspired. And then at the same time, we study the philosophy that we have been in this material world since time immemorial. So we can't expect quick results. So therefore, Rupa Goswami said, Utsan, Nishay, Dhairya. So the patience is required. All right? 14.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Lord is mentioning body and senses as two different entities.
So this is Adhishtanam Tata Karta. So in that, like we have, we in the ashram we were discussing this thing, and we were not able to understand why Krishna is mentioning this one's body includes senses. So like why the Lord mentions senses separately? What is the impetus that senses gives on, or it is different from body and the senses, the impetus that comes for the work?
Because see, when, as later on, Krishna is explaining that there is also the impetus for work. So that means when we speak of body includes both subtle and gross. So therefore, as later on Krishna is explaining the karma chodita, so there is an inspiration, then there is subtle work that happens before the gross work with the senses actually begins.
Okay.
So that also has to be taken into consideration, isn't it, for the work? Because the work includes the subtle work within the subtle body. So when the body is said, then both gross and subtle are included. And senses refers only to the gross body.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, Prabhuji. Fine, Prabhuji.
Okay. Why Lord doesn't use the word me himself in describing so? 46. Yeah, Krishna does that sometimes. He refers to the third person. Yes, in 46 he says, yes. Tam abhyarcha, him. The reason is whenever he's referring to Paramatma, he usually refers to as the third person. Of course, later on Krishna, he already said it once and again he will say that he is only the Paramatma. But then sometimes he refers to Paramatma because it is a Paramatma who's more active in the material world. Krishna personally, he is just enjoying in the spiritual world. So basically it is these Purusha avatars which are more active in the material world and accepting the fruits of the offerings and worship and everything. So that's the reason whenever Krishna refers to Paramatma, then he refers to as the third person. But then he, of course he clarifies that he is only the Paramatma. All right?
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Is the ultimate idea of Krishna consciousness to follow Varnashram? No, it's the other way around. The goal of Varnashram Dharma is to become Krishna conscious. As the Bhagavatam says, Ata Pombi Dvija Shreshta Varnashrama Vibhagashas Vanishtitasya Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshna. The purpose of Varnashram Dharma is, as we were discussing yesterday, that because we have certain propensities according to the influence of the gunas, then we engage those propensities in Krishna's service and gradually become purified and then ultimately come to the pure platform. Okay. How to understand Varnashram Dharma in the current perspective? Yeah, so that we already discussed yesterday. So in the correct perspective, basically, so whatever, and therefore, we find Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also Srila Prabhupada very much stressed on this verse from Brahmaji's press. Thane sthita shrutigatam tanuvan manobi. So Srila Prabhupada, therefore, in so many of his lectures, Prabhupada says, doesn't matter, you're a medical man, you continue your profession, you're an engineer, you continue your profession, you're whatever, lawyer, continue. So basically one just has to continue whatever profession one is doing in the outside world, and then sacrifice the fruits of the activities and engage one's consciousness in Krishna and perform the various activities of sadhana bhakti as instructed by spiritual master. So that's at best what we can do. And so therefore, if everything is done under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, then everything comes to the spiritual platform. So basically, unless the guru tells to change the profession or whatever, so then it's fine. So ultimately, we just need to check with our spiritual authorities, whatever we're doing, and then perform the various aspects of sadhana bhakti. Okay. Some devotees profess that Varnashram is the only way to practice Krishna consciousness. Yes, in the material world, the Varnashram is, as Prabhupada writes in our Bhagavad Gita purport, in the second chapter, that Varnashram is the stepping stone. So why it is a stepping stone? Because when you talk of pure bhakti, it's a very high level. Pure bhakti means just whatever Krishna says one is ready to do. So then there is no consideration of what are my propensities, what can I do, what can I not do. So then nothing of that consideration. So that's pure devotional service. That's Kevala Bhakti on the highest platform. So Krishna is telling Arjuna because that he is also not on that platform, because he also has his propensities to fight. And so therefore, the pure bhakti is a very high platform. So we have our propensities, psychophysical nature, all that. So then one needs to engage that in Krishna's service, get purified gradually, and then one can come to the highest platform. So therefore, that helps, the Varnashram duties helps one to ultimately come to pure Krishna consciousness. But of course, it's not that it's a must. If one practices intense devotional service, then and one gets purified very quickly, then there's no need. But then that's very rare. In most cases, one has to gradually get purified. So then one needs to perform one's duties in this world and then gradually get purified. All right. Should a Vaishnava engage in occupation duty of Vaishya, should try for making very high margin profits even in dealing with Vaishnava customers. Well, these are details. We cannot answer these questions on details. So one has to see what's best in the circumstances. Better take guidance from other grihasthas. Doing for the Lord, for example, temple dealings by devotees for cheap cost, or the case of Jew temple earlier days, once a plan to analyze, one should be okay to fight back or negotiate smartly. That's not cheating. That's ultimately, if it's done for Krishna, it's fine, right? So Prabhupada fought. He didn't say, oh, so Mr. Nair was trying to cheat. So Prabhupada didn't say it's all right. In fact, the devotees gave up, but Prabhupada never gave up. So ultimately, of course, Prabhupada was fighting for Krishna. So then for Krishna, it is fine. So if it's done for personal sake, then that's mode of passion. If it's done for personal. But then if it's done for Krishna, then yes, then it's fine. Then it's on the transcendent mind. All right.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jnana, jnana. The jnata is the soul. Jnata. Jnata is the soul. Parijnata. No. So for any work performed in the day-to-day life, no, the jnata is the one who gets the knowledge. It's not that the knowledge comes from the soul. The soul gets the knowledge from Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. That's what Prabhupada is writing in the purport, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Basically. So one gets the knowledge, and the purpose of the knowledge is to understand the Lord. That's all?
So far, yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine, good. So we'll proceed.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we are going to the next section now. So the next section is from 49 to 55, Jnana Yoga leading to the Brahmabhuta stage. So we see that Krishna has been speaking about performing prescribed duties and offering the fruits of the activities to the Lord. So basically he's been speaking about karma yoga. And if you remember discussions from the first 6 chapters, then as one performs karma yoga, especially Nishkam karma yoga, then one gets purified because one is performing detached work. And so as one is getting purified, then one comes to the level of jnana. So one more and more knowledge, one gets more and more knowledge that I'm not the body, I'm spirit soul. So basically there's more and more detachment from the body because he's detaching himself from the fruits of his work. So that leads to detachments. And that's how he gets more and more jnana. And then he progresses on the path of jnana. So the jnana is inbuilt within detached work. I think so. Maybe in one of our discussions, we gave the analogy of Baldev Vidyabhushan. He says that just like within the lotus stem, there are capillaries. So similarly, the jnana is inbuilt within detached work. So that's how one proceeds in the path of Gyan. And that's what was discussed in the 3rd, 4th, 5th chapters. There was discussion on the qualities of Gyanis. So now Krishna is speaking something similar over here. So performance of prescribed duties in a detached manner, that's Karma Yoga. And as one proceeds on the path of Karma Yoga, then one comes to the platform of Gyan. And so now what he's talking about is the Gyanis in the 49th verse. Asakta buddhi sarvatra jitatma vigata spruha neshkarmya siddhim paramam sannyasena digacchati. One who is self-controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain by practice of renunciation the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. So that's how the jnani gets, the Nishkam Karma Yogi gets more and more purified, and then he becomes detached. And so therefore, here we find the qualities of the jnani: asakta buddhi, jitatma, vigata spriha. So he is the intelligence, unattached intelligence. So no attachment to sense objects. His mind is controlled, jitatma, and vigata spriha, no material desires. So then, when one is thus purified of all the material contaminations, then one has no duties to perform. Neshkarmya siddhim. Then one comes to the platform of Neshkarmya. Non-reaction. So there are no reactions because he's totally purified. And so therefore, he can give up work at that stage. So this is similar to what was described in 3rd chapter, 17th verse about the Atmarati. And also the 6th chapter, 3rd verse, talking about the Yoga Rudha. So there Krishna says that when one comes to the Yoga Rudha platform, then cessation of work is the means. So when one is totally purified of all the material contamination, the influence of the modes, then one can renounce the work, because the prescribed duties are essentially meant for purification as long as one is influenced by the modes. But when one is free from that influence and one has no more material desires and all that, then one can actually give up the work. So here Krishna is talking about such a jnani who has been purified. Okay, somebody can read the purport.
Krishna Mohan Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji, please go on.
Real renunciation means that one should always think himself part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, think that he has no right to enjoy the results of his work. Since he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the results of his work must be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord. This is actually Krishna consciousness. The person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. By such a mentality, one is satisfied because he is actually acting for the Supreme. Thus, he is not attached to anything material. He becomes accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness derived from the service of the Lord. A sannyasi is supposed to be free from the reactions of his past activities. But a person who is in Krishna consciousness automatically attains this perfection without even accepting the so-called order of renunciation. This state of mind is called Yoga Rudha, or the perfectional stage of yoga. As confirmed in the 3rd chapter, Yastvatma Ratir Evasyat, one who is satisfied in himself has no fear of any kind of reaction from his activity.
Okay, so so that's what we find. Prabhupada is also referring to these verses from the 3rd chapter as well as the 6th chapter. And so the purpose of the Jnana Yoga is also ultimately to come to Krishna. So the ultimate goal of all the yoga systems is to come to the platform of Bhakti Yoga. And so that's what Prabhupada writes. So here, towards the end of his purport, Prabhupada is saying that a sannyasi is supposed to be free from the reactions of past activities, referring to the karma sannyasi over here, the jnani, who gives up his karma. But a person in Krishna consciousness then automatically attains this stage. So then he doesn't have to make a separate endeavor to come to the stage, but then by the practice of devotional service itself, one automatically comes to the liberated platform. There's no need of any separate endeavor for that. Okay, before we come to this. So 50. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma tatapnoti nibodhame samaseneva kaunteya nishtha jnanasya yapara. So the previous verse spoke about the jnani who has controlled his mind, intelligence, no material desires, all that. But the next question arises, but does he acquire the supreme? Does he achieve the supreme? And so Krishna is answering in this verse, O son of Kunti, learn from me how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. So yes, so the jnani also ultimately achieves the supreme Brahman. Siddhim, he also achieves perfection. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma. So he does achieve the supreme by practicing the process of jnana yoga. And so, what's the process that he practices? Okay, so just like here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the Lord describes for Arjuna how one can achieve the highest perfectional state simply by being engaged in his occupational duty, performing that duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One attains the supreme stage of Brahman simply by renouncing the result of his work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. That is the process of self-realization. So Prabhupada is describing how by karma yoga, that is essentially the sacrificing, renouncing the result of his work for satisfaction of the Supreme. So that's karma yoga. And then as one proceeds in karma yoga, one comes to the jnana platform, and then that's how ultimately one achieves the Supreme. So that's what Prabhupada is speaking about over here. And then the next verse is Krishna speaking about the process of jnana, the jnana marg. Okay, so for the jnani who has come to the jnana nishta platform, that means he's on the liberated platform, free from the influence of the modes. And so then what is his practice? So we'll just read the translations, 51 to 53. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who's always in trance and who's detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. So this is the process of jnana that has been described. And so here we find this in this entire process, there is no mention about any attachment to the Supreme Lord or any love or anything of that sort. Devotion, no, nothing of that sort has been mentioned. And so we can see the main emphasis is on detachment. The main emphasis on detachment from the body, detachment from false ego. So that's the process of jnana, where the more emphasis is on detachment. And so he has to live in a secluded place, vivikta sevi. So a secluded place and controlling the body, mind, and trance. So this is all the process of the jnanis. And that's how Prabhupada towards the end of the purport he says, thus when he's completely free from false ego, then he becomes non-attached to all material things And that is a stage of self-realization of Brahman. That stage is called the Brahma Bhuta stage. When one is free from the material conception of life, he becomes peaceful and cannot be agitated. And this is described in Bhagavad Gita 270. Apuryamanam machala pradishnam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sushantimapnoti nakamakami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers with the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So by this practice of Jnana Yoga, then the person comes to the Brahma Bhuta stage. So Brahma Bhuta stage means that basically one is on the liberated platform, not influenced by the three modes. And so by the practice of Jnana Yoga, it is possible for one to come to that platform. And so what are the symptoms of the Brahmabhuta stage? Krishna speaks in the next verse, 54, which is an important verse. Prabhupada quoted very often. Brahmabhuta Prasannātmā na shauchati na kaṅkshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Okay, read the purport.
Krishna Karunamurthy Prabhuji.
Purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahmabhuta stage, becoming one with Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who engages in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in the state of liberation, called Brahmabhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor. Yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is a misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no miseries. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing for which to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who has engaged in God service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or aspire for gain, because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment, because he knows that every living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world. Someone has higher and someone has lower. Higher and lower position are ephemeral, and a devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearance or disappearance. For him, stone and gold are equal value. This is the Brahmabhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. The idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria. And the senses are like serpents whose poison teeth are broken, as there is no fear of serpent with the broken teeth. There is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age.
Yes. So when one comes to the Brahma Bhuta platform, that means one is free from the influence of the modes, one has no more material desires, no more material hankerings. So then, na shochati, na kankshati, there is nothing to lament for or to hanker for, because he has no material desires. And then samasarveshu bhuteshu, so he sees everyone in relationship to the Supreme, and no enemies, no friends. So he sees everyone on equal platform. So on that platform, from that platform, the Jnani, he attains Mad Bhaktin Labate Param. So when the Jnani reaches the Brahmabhuta platform, on that platform, he attains Bhakti to the Supreme Lord. Okay, so how this happens? Okay, let's read this commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti, and then we will discuss. Okay, somebody read this commentary here.
Sangram Prabhu.
With the Hare Krishna, with the removal of all misconceptions. Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Okay. With the removal of all misconceptions or appearances, upadhi, one attains the state of Brahman, Brahmabhuta, by being in a state of uncovered consciousness. Because of the disappearance of the contamination of the gunas, he is said to be pure, prasanna, and he is the soul, atma. And because of absence of misconceptions of body, when he loses something, he does not lament. And when he fails to attain something, he does not hanker for it. Na sochati, na kankshati. Unlike his previous state, like an innocent child, he regards all beings as equal, whether good or bad, without looking at the externals. With the cessation of jnana, like a fire which dies without fuel, he attains indestructible bhakti to me in the form of hearing, chanting, and other processes arising after the cessation of jnana. Because through the action of my Swarupa Shakti, bhakti alone does not disappear, even with the disappearance of vidya and avidya, being different from the Maya Shakti. It is called Param, being far superior to jnana. Remaining after the disappearance of the Nishkam karma, jnana, and any other process, it surpasses all others and remains exclusively pure. Thus, Param is equal to the word Kevalam.
Continue.
Though bhakti was previously present in a small proportion during practices such as jnana and vairagya, just in order to bring about liberation, bhakti was not clearly visible, being like the antaryami in all beings. Therefore, the word labhate, meaning discovers, is the suitable word rather than produces, since it was already present within the person. Though a golden jewel remains hidden when mixed among grains of yellow dal, when the grains are destroyed, separated from them, the indestructible golden jewel becomes Kevala, attaining its pure state. At this particular time, there is also the possibility of attaining complete Prema Bhakti. The result of their practice in this case is not Suyajya, Sayujya. Thus, in that state, the phrase Param Bhaktim should be explained as meaning Prema Bhakti in this verse. Vishwanath explains in the commentary on next verse that some jnanis who also worship the Lord with genuine bhakti by association of devotees attain prema.
Okay, fine. So basically, what is happening here is this. as we hear the famous verse quoted by Prabhupada many times, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kabanoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karoye Udoi. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem. So Krishna Prem, love for Krishna, is inherently present within the heart of every living being, including the Jnanis. But now that Krishna Prem is covered over by layers and layers of material contamination since time immemorial. And so therefore, that Krishna Prem is unmanifest. Okay, so that's the current situation. Now, the Jnani, by his practices of Nishkam Karma Yoga and then Jnana, so all these material contaminations are removed. So when the material contaminations are removed, so what remains? The bhakti remains. The bhakti was always there. Only it was unmanifest because of the coverings. Now the coverings have been removed. So what remains? The pure bhakti remains. And so therefore, the word labate is used. So labate means discovers or manifests. It is not produced. It is just manifest. So of course, the same thing happens even in the practices of bhakti. So only the difference is in the sadhana. So the sadhana of the karmis and jnanis is different, and we are doing a different sadhana. But then the ultimate result is the same. So ultimately, by the sadhana of either the jnanis or the bhaktas, the material contamination is removed. And then when the material contamination is removed, the bhakti, which was originally present, becomes manifest. That's what happens in either cases. And so therefore, Vishwanath Thakur is giving this example of the golden jewel hidden among grains of yellow dal. So when the grains are destroyed, then automatically the golden jewel becomes manifest. So therefore, here, mad bhaktim labate param. So the word param means kevala bhakti or pure bhakti. That is what becomes manifest. It was always there, only it was hidden. But once the material contaminations are removed, then that bhakti becomes manifest. And so then on that platform, it is just like dried wood. So dried wood, just bring a small spark and immediately the wood bursts into flames. So similarly, such a jnani is like dried wood. No material desires, pure, a little contact with the Lord or a pure devotee or some practice of devotional service, and immediately the bhakti bursts out. And that is why, if you remember in the 7th chapter, when Krishna is speaking about Chaturvida Bhajante Mam Jana Sukrita Artho Jignasur Arthati Jnani. And then in the further verse, in the 17th verse, he says, Tesham, so he says, amongst all these four, the Jnani is the best and most dear to me. So why? For this reason. So that Jnani is referring to this Jnani here. Same thing. So the Jnani has no material desires. He is already pure. And so becomes very easy for such a person to come to the platform of Prema Bhakti. And so if he gets some Bhakti, some association of devotees, then he may directly come to the level of Prema. So the best example is we see the 4 Kumaras and Shukdev Goswami, who were Jnanis, Brahmavadis. And so we find in the case of the four Kumaras, that how we know the past time they went to see Narayan on the instruction of their father Brahma, and then they were stopped by Jay and Vijay, and they got angry, and they cursed them. And then Lord Narayan came to settle the matter, along with Lakshmi ji and Garuda and all this. So he got some good Sangha there. And so we know the famous verse where the four Kumaras smelled the tulsi on the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. And immediately, as soon as they smelled that tulsi, what happens? Their prema bhakti manifested. And then on the spot, they began to manifest symptoms of prema, ecstatic symptoms of prema, tears from the eyes and standing of hair and shivering. And some acharyas comment that Lord Narayan, in fact, sarcastically, he said, what happened? You're supposed to be very sober Brahmagyanis. What happened? Why have you become so agitated? So, but then that's what happens. Because they were already on a highly purified platform. And so the same thing with Shukdev Goswami. He was already Brahman realized right within the womb, and that's the reason he never wanted to come out. But then on the request of the Lord himself, then he came out, and then he ran into the forest, and then of course Vyasdeva arranged his disciples to recite the Bhagavatam. But the moment the touch with the Bhagavatam came, finished. Then he immediately became purified, became a pure devotee. So that's the state of these jnanis who are already purified. Then they very easily come to the platform of pure bhakti, prema. So that is what is being spoken of over here, mad bhaktim labate param. Then that bhakti which is already there within the heart becomes manifest. Right. Okay, fine. So now, okay, lecture by Srila Prabhupada, read.
Sangram Behera Prabhuji.
Yes, bro. Prasannātmā means jubilant. You will find all our boys and girls, they are always jubilant. Unless they are jubilant, they cannot dance in this way. They are not dancing dogs. They are feeling jubilant. And therefore, they are dancing. This is the position of Brahmavata, Prasannātmā. Prasannātmā, unless one is very satisfied, he cannot be jubilant. He should be morose. He cannot dance. He cannot chant.
Of course, Prabhupada is equating this stage to the devotees in general. Of course, one could say that because ultimately that's what the stage that the devotees will come to. But then that stage is you could say in a budding form, even at the stage of sadhana. So there's definitely some happiness that one is feeling. So there's that we'll discuss in Nectar of Devotion. There's happiness at all stages, whether it's sadhana, bhakti, bhava, prema. So therefore, but then the stage that is being spoken of here in the Bhagavad Gita is, of course, a very high platform where one is on the liberated platform, free from the influence of the modes. And then when one comes to that platform of bhakti, then what happens? That is what is being discussed in the next verse. But before that, maybe one point needs clarification. Maybe we did discuss it in some of our previous classes, but then I think so that requires a bit of clarification, because then we find that Srila Prabhupada, he talks about the impersonalists and then he highly condemns them. And so we have to understand that there are different types of impersonalists. And so Vishwanath Thakur, he talks about 4 types of jnanis. So the first type Just a second. Does it come in this commentary? Let's see. No, I didn't. Okay. Okay, fine. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that there are 4 types of jnanis. The first type of jnani is his desire is sayujya, that is merging into the impersonal Brahman. And he thinks that there is no need of any bhakti to achieve his goal. Goal is sayujya, and he thinks that there's no need of any bhakti to achieve that goal. The second type of jnanis is the goal is sayujya, merging into the impersonal Brahman. But he understands that some bhakti is required, some devotional activities are required, like even the impersonalists, they could also be performing some devotional activities like chanting the holy names, they could be doing some kirtan, they could be doing some deity worship. So they may perform some devotional activities like that. So they understand that some bhakti is required. But at the same time, these the second category of jnanis, they think that the impersonal Brahman is the supreme, and the forms of the Lord, like Rama and Krishna, are simply sattvagun manifestations of the Brahman. And so they think that these forms of the Supreme are controlled or within the gunas, modes, they're materially contaminated. That means basically material form. So that's the second category of the jnanis. The third category of the jnanis is, yes, the goal is to achieve the Supreme Brahman, and they do understand that some bhakti is required to achieve the Supreme Brahman. But at the same time, when they understand that the forms of the Lords, Krishna, Rama, and all the various avatars, they are also manifestations of the Supreme Brahman. That means they understand that they are transcendental, they are not material. Only thing is they are attracted to the impersonal Brahman. But they do understand that the forms of the Lord are also transcendental, they're not material. And they do understand that some bhakti is required for their perfection. And the fourth category is actually, they're almost devotees. They're almost devotees. But then there's only some slight attraction to the impersonal Brahman. And that's the category that is being spoken of in the 54th verse. So they're almost like devotees, they're totally pure, no material desires, just a little attraction to the impersonal Brahman, and then they come in touch with devotees of the Lord, and then they very easily become pure devotees. So just like the verse quoted in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, Atma Ramascha Muniyo. So that refers to these type of jnanis. So the first two categories of the jnanis, the first category, they don't think that bhakti is required. The second category think that bhakti is required, but then they offend the Supreme Lord, thinking that the form of the Lord in this world, when he comes to this world, is material, sattvagun form. And so because these two categories, they offend the Supreme Lord, so therefore they cannot even achieve the impersonal Brahman because of the offense. And so the second category are the Mayavadis. Okay, so when Prabhupada speaks about the impersonalists, sometimes he refers to Mayavadis because all of them are impersonalists. All of them are impersonalists. But then the Mayavadis are one category of them, and it refers to the second category in this list, who consider that the form of the Lord is material. And that's what Krishna also refers to in the 9th chapter, 11th verse. Avajananti mam mudha manusham tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto. So this is referring to these Mayavadis. And then in the 12th verse, then Krishna tells what is the destination of the Mayavadis. Mogasha, mogakarmano, mogyana, vichetasa, rakshasim, masurim, chaiva. So that's referring to the Mayavadis. So that's the second category. So, but the third category, they achieve the impersonal Brahman by the grace of Bhakti Devi, because they don't offend the Supreme Lords and they have some bhakti. So by the grace of Bhakti Devi, they achieve the impersonal Brahman. And the fourth category, we have already said that they very easily become devotees. So that's these four categories. And so therefore we must properly understand that when Srila Prabhupada is condemning the impersonalists, then essentially he's condemning the Mayavadis, who of course form the major category of impersonalists these days. So the category that we are referring to in the 54th verse, the highly purified Jnanis, like the four Kumaras and Shukadeva Goswami, that's very rare. Very, very rare. But what we find in modern day society is just Mayavadis, and that too hodgepodge Mayavadis. They don't even know Mayavad actually. Mayavad given by Shankaracharya. So in any case, so that understanding must be there, and that's when Prabhupada is condemning the impersonalists. Then these type of impersonalists who are properly following the bona fide process of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and then going up the yoga ladder, then those are bona fide. They are bona fide, and they get purified, and then ultimately they also come to bhakti. That's why that's the yoga ladder. The ultimate purpose of the yoga ladder is to come to bhakti. So then we are not talking about, so when Prabhupada condemns the impersonalists, then he's not talking about this type of jnanis. But of course, even these type of jnanis, to come to the platform of bhakti is bhaunam janmanamante, jnanavanman prapadita. So it could take lifetimes and lifetimes before they come to this platform. But then it's a bona fide process. It's a bona fide process. And of course, Krishna does speak about them in the 12th chapter also. 12th chapter, the 3rd and 4th verses, right? 3rd and 4th verses also speaking about the path of Jnana. And then in the 5th verse, Krishna explains, Kleshodikatarstesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyaktahi gati dukkham. So that's also the process of Jnana that is being described in those verses also. But there also, if you see in the 3rd and 4th verses of the 12th chapter, there also Krishna explains that ultimately they achieve me, right? So why? Because it's a bona fide process. But the Mayavadis, they don't achieve the supreme. They just go to hell or lower species or whatever. Okay, so that's the Brahmbhuta stage of the Jnanis. And so that's how simply by practicing, by performing prescribed Varnashram duties in a detached way, come to Nishkam Karma Yoga. So they also can gradually progress on the yoga ladder. And of course, at any stage, if one comes in touch with devotees, then they directly come to the bhakti path. And so now in this verse, now Krishna explains, if one comes to the path of bhakti, then what happens? Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyasyasmi tatvatah tato mam tatvato gyatva vishati tat anantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Okay, read the purport.
Karthik Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his plenary portions cannot be understood by mental speculation nor by the non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take to pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. As already stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.25, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya. He is not revealed to everyone. No one can understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. One who is fully conversant with the Krishna science becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. Devotional service is there, and as long as devotional service exists, there must be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. Such knowledge is never vanquished, even after liberation. Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, the same distinction is there. The same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. One should not mistakenly think that the word Vishate enters into me. Suppose the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No. Vishate means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in one's individuality to engage in his association and render service unto him. For instance, a green bird enters a green tree not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into the ocean and merging. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality like an aquatic in the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean. If we go deep, surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. Because of his pure devotional service, a devotee can understand the transcendental qualities and the opulences of the Supreme Lord in truth. As it is stated in the 11th chapter, only the devotional service can one understand. Only by devotional service can one understand. The same is confirmed here. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service and enter into his kingdom. After attainment of the Brahmabhuta stage of freedom from material conceptions, devotional service begins by one's hearing about the Lord. When one hears about the Supreme Lord, automatically the Brahmabhuta stage develops and material contamination, greediness and lust for sense enjoyment disappears. As lust and desires disappear from the heart of a devotee, he becomes more attached to the service of the Lord, and by such attachment he becomes free from material contamination. In that state of life, he can understand the Supreme Lord. This is the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam also. After liberation, the process of Bhakti or transcendental service continues. The Vedanta Sutra 4.1.12 confirms this. Prayanat tatrapi hi drishtam. This means that after liberation, the process of devotional service continues. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, real devotional liberation is defined as the reinstatement of the living entity in his own identity, his own constitutional position. The constitutional position is already explained. Every living entity is part and parcel, fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his constitutional position is to serve. After liberation, this service is never stopped. Actual liberation is getting free from misconceptions of life.
Okay. So, so when one comes to the platform of Bhakti, then only on the platform Bhakti, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati, Yavanya Shasmi Tattvataha, then one can understand the Supreme Lord in truth. So therefore, Prabhupada begins his purport by saying, cannot be understood by mental speculation nor by non-devotees. So when one wants to understand, he has to take pure devotion service under the guidance of pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. Nam Prakasha Sarvasya. So Prabhupada is writing, no one can understand by erudite scholarship, mental speculation, university degrees. So by none of this one can understand. Because Krishna himself doesn't reveal himself. He doesn't expose himself unless that bhakti is there, unless the surrender is there. And that surrender, of course, has to be through the devotee, not directly. And so, otherwise, one can read all the Vedas and study all the verses and memorize all the verses. One could do so many things. But if the bhakti element is not there, the surrender is not there, then understanding the Supreme Lord becomes practically impossible, because Krishna keeps himself covered by his Yogamaya Shakti, and one cannot understand. So, therefore, the process is bhakti, and bhakti means love. That means one is ready to act in accordance to what Krishna likes and give up those things that Krishna doesn't like. That's basically bhakti. So that means we understand that bhakti through his pure devotees, the acharyas, and so then one has to follow the rules and regulations of the acharyas, and then that's how Krishna is pleased. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasada. And then Prabhupada is elaborately explaining that Vishuti tat anantaram, because there is every possibility of misunderstanding that he enters into me. So therefore, Prabhupada is explaining that when you speak of bhakti, so there has to be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. There is Krishna, Krishna Bhakti, and Prema. So all this has to be there. Of course, I was referring to Sambandha Vidya and Prayojan. That's in context of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says. But in any case, but the point is there has to be the servitor, the served, and the process of devotional service, the process of service. So all three have to be there. Then only there can be bhakti. So therefore, and that bhakti is always present. So the individuality of the jiva, the Supreme Lord, always exists. If that individuality is not there, then where is the question of service? If both the Lord and the jiva were on the same platform, then where is the distinction of the servitor and the served? So that distinction always has to be there, and it is always there. Even on the liberated platform, even when one is liberated, then that individuality, as Prabhupada explains, is always there. And so therefore, to explain that Vishuti enters into me, then the famous analogy of the green bird entering into the green tree is given. So it may appear as if the bird has merged into the tree, but obviously it is not merged. The bird remains. It's only an illusion. One may think that the bird is merged into the tree. Prabhupada in his lectures gives another example, that is just like we see an aeroplane flying. So as the plane flies ahead, then it appears as if the plane has merged into the sky, correct? I'm sure we all have seen that. So it appears as if the plane has merged into the sky, but has it merged? No. So similarly, even after liberation, the individuality of the soul always remains. And the other analogy Prabhupada is giving is, of course, the same analogy is the Mayavadis misuse to prove their point, but then that's their bogus understanding. So the other analogy is being given, that is of the rivers merging into the ocean. And so, yes, the rivers merge into the ocean, but then the individuality of the aquatics always remains. And so in his lectures, Srila Prabhupada actually further expands this analogy. And then he says, as he says here also, surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. So Prabhupada explains that the superficial water, the superficial water, it appears to merge. Of course, individuality of the water molecules always remains. But even if you consider that the superficial water has merged into the ocean, and so Prabhupada says, then what happens to the superficial water? The superficial water becomes evaporated by the sun, becomes clouds, and then comes down once again. And so he says that's what happens to the impersonalists. So the impersonalists who want to merge into the impersonal Brahman, then even though they may merge, they fall down. because that liberation is not true liberation. And that's what Brahmaji is saying in his praise. Ye anya arvindaksha vimuktamaninas. Tvayasta bhavat avishuddha buddhaya. So he says, so they are imagining themselves to be liberated. Vimukta maninas. They're thinking themselves to be liberated. Why? Because of avishuddha buddhaye. Because of contaminated intelligence, they're considering themselves to be liberated. But that is not true liberation. So even if they merge into the impersonal Brahman, that is also, as we discussed in 12.5, so they don't realize the Ananda aspects. They may realize the Sat and Chit features, but the Ananda is missing. And because the Ananda is missing, which is the constitutional position of the living entity, Anandmaya Vyasat, so therefore, then they have to fall down. So then, Aruya Krishnena Parampadam Patanti Adha Anadrita Yushmadangraya. So because of not having taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then they have to come down. And so Prabhupada again gives the examples that when there is no shelter, so just like the rockets, so there is no shelter, then it has to come down. So if the spaceship doesn't get shelter of a planet or something like that, then it has to come down. And Prabhupada says then it crashes into the ocean. It crashes into the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean or somewhere. So that's what happens to the impersonalists also. So, but as far as the devotees are concerned, because they have taken shelter deep in the ocean like the aquatics, then they are not evaporated. They are not evaporated and their individuality remains. That's how Srila Prabhupada explains. And so, as Prabhupada is explaining then, that after attainment of Brahmabhuta stage or freedom from material concept, devotional service begins, because that's when, as in other places, Prabhupada says, real devotional service begins from the Brahmabhuta stage, because that's the purified platform. So before that, then it is all, as Prabhupada says, apprenticeship. So it's like a training program. So one may be trained, one may be undergoing training to become a doctor. But okay, so he's doing something, he's assisting basically, he's assisting some senior doctor as long as he is undergoing the training. But then only when he becomes properly trained, then he independently starts his practice. So that's apprenticeship. So as long as one is practicing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, then that's not apprenticeship. Then we are simply assisting those who are Mahabhagavats, Mahatmas in their service. Prabhupada did mention that in the lecture. So he said once that actually all services in all temples I'm supposed to do, but then you're assisting. So then after the liberated platform, then real devotional service begins, because that's bhava and prema. So at least asakti, bhava, prema. So asakti is, technically speaking, of course, liberated platform means bhava stage. So then real devotional service begins with love. So that's why Prabhupada says that devotional service begins after the Brahmabhuta platform. Before that, of course, it is still devotional service. It is still pure devotional service, because our goal is to achieve that platform. The means and the end are the same in the process of bhakti. But then, and then one can come to the platform of real liberation, as Prabhupada is quoting Bhagavatam. Mukti hitva nitha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. That is real liberation, to be situated in one's eternal constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. That's real liberation, where one finds true shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And then, having attained that true shelter, then there is no question of falling down. So therefore, Prabhupada writes, therefore his constitutional position is to serve. After liberation, the services never stopped. So actual liberation is getting free from the misconceptions. So that's how, so this is the ultimate platform, which is the ultimate goal for everyone. Whether one is following the process of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, So whichever process one is following, then ultimately the goal is to come to this platform of Bhakti Yoga and the proper understanding of the Supreme Lord. That's the goal of all the yogis. Only there are different paths which are ultimately leading to the same goal. And that's the discussion on the yoga ladder, of course. All right. So that's how here Krishna is describing how from the paths of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, ultimately one can come to the platform of Bhakti. And of course, those who are fortunate then come directly to the practice of Bhakti, or they may have practiced all these other present previous lives or whatever. But then when they come to the practice of Bhakti, then if one is sincere and serious, then progress is much more faster. Okay, fine. So that's the discussion on this section. This is the same thing. Okay, before we go to the next section, any questions, clarifications?
Yes, around 5 questions have come in, Prabhuji. Starting from
What's that?
Anand Prabhu asked at 7:31 a.m. Is there any difference between renunciation and detachment?
Difference between renunciation and detachment. Okay, you're asking in what context? What is the reference?
Anand Prabhuji.
Yeah, Prabhuji, sometimes I find these two words getting interchangeably used. Sometimes I also draw inference that when you practice detachment over time, it can become renunciation or something those lines. So I'm trying to place is there an order to it? Like you have to first detach yourself, then you become renunciate, or they're almost the same?
Of course, we'll be discussing these points in Nectar of Devotion. But then detachment is a byproduct of bhakti. As the Bhagavatam says, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janyatya Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayad Ahitukam. So the Vairagya develops as a result of the practice of bhakti, because one becomes detached from everything material because of higher taste and an attachment to Krishna, then automatically detachment develops from everything that's material. And so that's detachment from everything material. And when the detachment from everything material takes place, then one can use everything appropriately in the service of the Lord. Then there is the definition of Yukta Vairagya and Falgu Vairagya. So that is real renunciation and false renunciation. So of course, both involve detachments. Real renunciation, false renunciation, both involve detachments. But then the real renunciation not only involves detachment, but also involves a positive attachment to Krishna. That means one understands that everything belongs to Krishna and therefore can be used in Krishna's service. And so yes, one is detached for oneself, but at the same time, one uses everything in Krishna's service. That's real renunciation. But Falgu Vairagya of the Jnanis and Yogis is they're only detached from everything material, but because they don't see the connection to Krishna, then that's called as false renunciation. So detachment is there in both cases, detachment from everything material. But then when we talk of renunciation, then it involves something more. Okay, so I think so for now that's okay. We'll discuss more in Nectar of Devotion. All right.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Next is by Vijay Narasimha Prabhuji. How is it possible to be in the category third and still be impersonal?
Yes, because they have a greater attraction to the impersonal Brahman. So it is. So it's just like the example that's given. So just like the gopis, the gopis, when Krishna disappeared from the Ras Leela, then he manifested as Narayan form. So when the gopis saw Narayan form, they offered their respects to him, but then they still said, "Where is Krishna?" So it is something like that. That's the example given. So similarly, the impersonalists in that category, they may see Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, They may see all these various forms and they offer respects, understanding that this is a manifestation of the Brahman. But then they have their own attraction to the impersonal Brahman. So that's how it is. So the attraction, because that conditioning is there, the conditioning of attraction to the impersonal is there. And so therefore, they have that attraction. So there is basically, it is an incomplete realization of the absolute truths. So the realization has not matured. So then, in order for that realization to mature, then they need some association of devotees to come to a higher level of realization. Okay? Fine. You mentioned when the material coverings are completely removed, what left is pure bhakti. You also mentioned the bhakti can spring only with contact of devotee. How important is association of devotees for these jnanis opposed to? Yes, the association of bhakti is always required to ignite the bhakti. Yes, the bhakti is there, but that's why we gave the example of the wood. So the fire is present within the woods. Fire is present within the dried wood, but still it requires a spark of fire to bring out that fire from within the woods. So similarly, so for the jnanis also who are totally pure, so yes, it's like dried wood. So the bhakti is there. There's nothing else. All the coverings have been removed. The pure bhakti is there. But still there has to be the touch of bhakti. And so therefore we see in the example of both the four Kumaras and Shukdev Goswami. So that touch of bhakti has to be there.
Prabhu, one question regarding to the previous question by Vijay Narasimha Prabhu. Like when the jnanis, they are attracted to the this one, in the case of the gopis that you told, we can understand they have been attracted to a higher form, and when they saw Narayan, they could not able to get the same attraction.
Correct.
But in case of jnanis, if they see the form of Lord Rama or Krishna, so it is a higher form of bliss. How is it that they are not able to attracted to that?
Yes, because the realization is not there.
Okay.
So that means they, it's basically attachments. It's attachment to the conception. So because they are attached to their own conception, or you could say misconception, so because of that attachment, then that attachment is an impediment. It's a contamination which prevents them from becoming attracted to the supreme form. Now, it's not very surprising, isn't it? How many, as Prabhupada is explaining in that purport to the Yogamaya Samavrita in that verse, Prabhupada is saying, when Krishna was personally present, how many people saw Krishna directly, right in front of them? So all the demons saw, right? Duryodhana saw, Paundrak saw, everyone saw, but they couldn't understand why.
So then can we say like it's only by association of devotees these people can move in, even with
Exactly.
the association?
Exactly. So unless that mercy is there, praise prasada leshanu grihita evahi janati tatvam. That is what is required. Prasada leshanu grihita. So the prasad is required. The mercy is required. The mercy of the Lord coming through the devotees. That is required. Without that, there is no possibility. So then they remain, so the materialists remain, they remain attached to their conceptions. That is simply envious mentality. And the jnanis remain attached to their sattvagun conception. So therefore it is said that the jnanis must even surrender their sattvagun jnana in order to come to the platform of bhakti. So they have to give up those attachments to the impersonal Brahman. That's what Prabhupada explains in 12.5, if you remember. To the end of the purport, Prabhupada explains that the problem is, one of the problems for the jnanis is that even if by some good fortune they come into the association of devotees, giving up their impersonal conception, which they have been so attached to, becomes difficult. Prabhupada writes over there. So that because those conceptions are very deep rooted. And so then it requires some prasad, it requires some mercy for them to give up those conceptions and then totally take up to bhakti.
So Prabhuji, on that same point, I had one question.
Ah.
So if these jnanis are asked that who is at higher level, even though they realize Lord Rama as one of the transcendental form, will they say that the impersonal Brahman is higher than
Supreme,
Lord
yes.
Rama?
Yes, that's
Then
their understanding. So for them, the impersonal Brahman is supreme, and all these are manifestations of that impersonal Brahman.
Then isn't that sort of a sin to think
Now
that
you may
way?
call it whatever you like, but basically it is an incomplete understanding, an incomplete realization, and so then they need to be purified to get the right understanding.
All right, Prabhuji.
Okay. Yes, you could say the fourth type of jnanis are Brahmavadis. Even the third category can be called as Brahmavadis. Okay, so I think so we already clarified that about the category 3, and I think Harishatra Prabhu asked. Is that all right?
So like just one this one on that. So if jnanis, that means like mechanical process can make a person like a dry wood, but then igniting like the bhakti should require the touch of a devotee. So that's
Yes.
Okay.
So Bonam Janmante, 4 types. So which type? Right, so there in that verse Bonam Janmanam Ante, so that definitely refers to this fourth category of jnanis. That is why they're very dear to the Supreme Lords. And Bonam Janmanam Ante is referring to the ordinary jnanis. Maybe the third category, you could say the third category jnanis. That is Bonam Janmanam Ante. But the fourth category jnanis, they may not require Bonam Janmanam. All right.
Prabhuji, one question.
Yes.
There is another verse where it says that 4 type of people come to Supreme Lord. So it also mentions Jnani in the end.
Yes, that's what I said. So that jnani refers to the fourth category of jnanis that we have just spoken, because there Krishna explains they don't have material desires, they're very dear to him. So that refers to the fourth category, but then Bonam Janmanam Ante refers to the third category.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay. Jnana Yogi is mentioned, yoga ladder. Who will come out? 4 categories. Yes, so these are the ones, so in the yoga ladder, they are the ones who don't offend the Supreme Lord. So basically you could say the third category, fourth category. So basically they don't offend the Supreme Lord. That's a bona fide process. Mayavad is not a bona fide process. That is, of course, Shankaracharya's. Okay. Is Mayavad philosophy introduced by Shankaracharya's teachings are diluted, misinterpreted by his followers? Yes. So yes, as we know, Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva. He knows who is Krishna. He knows all that. But of course, he presented Mayavad. There is no doubt about that. Internally he knew the truth, but he presented Mayavad. That is correct. And therefore, Prabhupada explains, therefore, Shankaracharya didn't comment on the Bhagavatam because he thought that's too difficult. So he commented on the other scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, but he didn't comment on the Bhagavatam. Of course, later on, the Mayavadis, they commented and they did so many other things. Four Kumaras, so Shukdev Goswami meeting, they moved from Shankaracharya. No, then they're on the topmost level of prema. So Now, so now what exactly is the ras? I don't know what exactly which rasa. I'm not very sure about that. But then they basically were on the platform of prema. So I'm not very sure about which rasa. But in any case, they achieved prema. That's good enough. Jnana Mishra Bhakti versus Jnanis in Brahmluta stage. I think. Yes, so that those Jnanis in our discussion today, the fourth category of Jnanis, they come under Jnana Mishra Bhakti because the Bhakti is what is most prominent. The material contamination has been removed, and so the Bhakti is what is most prominent. Maybe some little traces of attachment to impersonal Brahman may be there, but that's insignificant. So therefore, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, those Jnanis in the Chaturvida Bhajante Mam, that's referring to Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Yes. So the Jnanis in the Brahmbhuta stage, yes. That's Jnana Mishra Bhakti, correct. Another part of the...
Both are same, Jnana Mishra Bhakti and the Jnanis attaining Bhakti Labhate Param. That
yes, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct, because that's what happens at the Brahmbhuta stage. It's the Bhakti that is most prominent. As we already described, the material contaminations have been removed. Okay, there's another part to the Bhajagovintam. What is that?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
This is Raghavendra here.
Yes, yes.
Prabhuji, so Shastri has composed this Bhajagovindam. So can that, how to understand that recitation? Is that recited in the stage of second stage or third stage of impersonalism, Prabhuji?
No, Shankaracharya is not either in second stage or third stage. He is Lord Shiva. So he is a pure devotee. And so he is expressing his own devotion to Lord Krishna. And he's in fact telling the Mayavadis that the ultimate goal is Bhajagovindam. He's telling them. So though he presented Mayavad philosophy, he knows the truth. And so he's expressing his own devotion to Lord Krishna because he's a Vaishnava. So that is in a totally different category. It has nothing to do with the impersonalists. All right?
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay, that's it?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, good. So let's go to the next section, 56 to 60, working in pure devotional service. Which verse is this? Vipashya. Is 56? Okay, and well, let's recite the verse. Sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvyapashrayah matprasadat avapnoti shashvatam padamavyayam. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. So the question could be raised. So Krishna has spoken in the previous verses about what is the destination of the Jnanis. And so now the question could be raised. So what's the destination of the devotees? What happens to the devotees? How does Krishna reciprocate with the devotees? And Krishna is speaking in this verse. Okay, please read the purport.
Uncle Prabhuji. Ankur Prabhuji or Ravi Shankar Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Uncle Prabhuji, please.
The word Mad Vipashra means under the protection of the Supreme Lord. To be free from material contamination, a pure devotee acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. There is no time limitation for a pure devotee. He is always 24 hours a day, 100% engaged in the activities under the direction of the Supreme Lord. To a devotee who is thus engaged in Krishna consciousness, the Lord is very, very kind. In spite of all difficulties, he is eventually placed in the transcendental abode or Krishna Lok. He is guaranteed entrance there. There is no doubt about it. In that supreme abode, there is no change. Everything is eternal, imperishable, and full of knowledge.
Yes, so here Krishna is talking about his devotees and he says, Sarva karmani api sada, though they're engaged in all types of activities. So that means the acharyas explain that even though he is engaged in all types of activities, that means basically varnashram duties, prescribed duties, basically nitya karmas, naimitya karmas. So he's engaged in all these activities. So why is engaged? He's still engaged in varnashram duties because that means he may still have some material desires. There's possibility. He may still have some material desires. Therefore, he's still performing all these duties. So, but even then, mad vyapashraya. So here vipashraya, V indicates special. So he has taken special shelter of the Supreme Lord. The word apa there, vyapa ashraya. So the word apa indicates in spite of some contamination or some other activities. That means basically in spite of some material desires. But he has taken shelter, protection of the Supreme Lord. So that is the situation that is being described here. So they are devotees, they're performing their prescribed duties, there may be some material desires, but they have taken shelter of the Lord. So why Krishna is speaking that? Because we'll see in the next verse, because Arjuna also sort of falls in that category. He still has the influence of the gunas, he still has the tendency to fight, and so he's still performing his duties of fighting. So Arjuna also falls in that category. And so therefore Krishna is saying, okay, no problem if one is in that category. But if he has taken shelter of the Lord, then what happens? Mat prasadat. Then by the mercy of the Lord, Shashvatam padam avyayam, he achieves the eternal abode of the Lord. So because of having taken shelter of the Lord, he receives the mercy. And then the mercy does the purification part. Okay. As already we have seen 9:30 and 31. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvashantim nigachati. So even though a devotee may have some material desires, but if he takes shelter of the Lord, then by Krishna's mercy, somehow Krishna purifies. How that purification takes place, that could be in a variety of ways. How that purification takes place, that Krishna will decide how to do that purification, whether it may be by what is that? By taking away all the wealth. What's that verse? When Krishna shows special mercy, he takes away all the wealth.
Yasyaham anugrahami.
Yes, yasyaham anugrahami harishe tadhanam shanai. So he may do that, or he may award some other punishments or whatever it may be. So Krishna knows how to do the purification part, but then because he has taken shelter of the Lord, then he does that purification part and ultimately takes the devotee back to his abode. So that's how Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees. Siddharth Prabhu, what has come right on top? I can't see. So this is commentary to which verse?
18.56.
Okay, 56. Okay, this verse. Okay, fine. So then somebody can read this.
Ravi Shankar Prabhuji.
it has thus been said that the Jnani step by step given up the result of work itself, and then Jnana attend Sayugya. Now, hear from me how my devotee attend.
A little louder, please.
That devotee, am I okay, Prabhuji, now?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. That devotee takes shelter of me even with evident material desired. We apa ashraya. We stand for the
Visheshataha. Visheshataha.
Particularly, and apa stand for the apakritaha.
Apakrishta. Apakrishta meaning low. Low means there is some contamination. Okay, good.
He is not even a Niskam Bhakta, for he performed all action, even material ones, such as the protecting wife and children, as well as Nitya Nimittika and Nitya Nimittika and Karmas. What is the question of his given up karma, yoga, jnana, worship of devata or others' desire? The words ashrayate means he completely served. The prefix emphasized the predominance of service. The use of word api indicates inferiority of each other's action. Thus he performed these others activity but as secondary action. Thus he has bhakti mixed with the karma rather than karma mixed with bhakti, which was already described in the first 6 chapters.
Okay, so the important point is, yes, even though he may have some material desires and is performing various activities, but bhakti is the prominent aspect. Okay, so it's something like karma mishra bhakti, he says. So bhakti is the predominant aspect. Bhakti is on the front burner, and there is some contamination. So then Krishna takes care of that contamination because he has taken shelter of the Lord. Okay, go ahead. Somebody else can read. Somebody else can go ahead.
Sita Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, please read, Mataji.
There is no overlapping. There is no overlapping actions with the previous descriptions. That Bhakta attains my eternal dhamas, padam, such as Vaikunta, Madhura, Dwaraka, and Ayodhya. But will those dhamas remain after the pralaya? They are indestructible, abhyayam. At the time of Mahapralaya, my dhamas will not disappear because of my
inconceivable
power. The Gnani, after many births, having undergone much suffering and austerities, having stopped the action of senses for sense objects, attain Naishkarmya and then Sayujya. How does this devotee performing actions and having desires attain your eternal dhamas just by taking shelter of you? He attains it by my mercy, mat prasadat. Know that my mercy is inconceivable and most powerful. The karma mishra bhakta gets
Salokya. Yes. So that is the special reciprocation of the Lord with his devotee. The Jnani, he may perform so many austerities for many, many births. And then most Jnanis, or of course, these days, even those Jnanis don't exist. But in any case, so they can at the most achieve impersonal Brahman, Sayujya. But then the devotee, even though he may have some material desires, Krishna is saying, he attains my abodes. So then how is that? So then Krishna is saying, Mat prasada, that is the cause. The cause is my mercy. And that mercy is inconceivable and most powerful. So that is the special benefit or benediction for the devotees, the mercy of the Lord. So the mercy factor is inconceivable and most powerful. And so that's the added advantage which one on the path of bhakti has. Because of that mercy, then there is very quick purification that takes place. And Krishna can just, by his inconceivable mercy and inconceivable ways, he can just nullify all the contamination and purify the devotee and then take him back to his abode. So that all happens by his inconceivable mercy. Okay, so now Krishna has spoken many things, and so he has spoken about, right in this chapter, he spoke about the Nishkam Karma Yogi, he spoke about performing one ashram duties, and he spoke about the Gyanis. So Arjuna may be wondering, okay, what am I supposed to do? So the next verse is like a direct instruction for Arjuna. Chetasa sarva karmani mayi sanyasya matparaha buddhi yogam upashritya machitta satatam bhava. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. Purport?
Malti Mataji. Hemnathan Prabhu, Malti Mataji, or okay, Kartike Prabhu. Okay.
Prabhu, yes. Shall I read?
Okay,
Yes,
Malti
please go
Mataji.
ahead.
In all when one acts in Krishna consciousness, he does not act as the master of the world. Just like a servant, one should act fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. A servant has no individual independence. He acts only on the order of the master. A servant acting on behalf of the Supreme Master is unaffected by profit and loss. He simply discharges his duty faithfully in terms of the order of the Lord. Now, one may argue that Arjuna was acting under the personal direction of Krishna, but when Krishna is not present, how should one act? If one acts according to the direction of Krishna in this book, as well as under the guidance of the representative of Krishna, then the result will be the same. The Sanskrit word matpara is very important in this verse. It indicates that one has no goal in life save and expect acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. And while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. This is perfect Krishna consciousness. One should, however, note that after doing something whimsically, he should not offer the result to the Supreme Lord. That sort of duty is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. One should act according to the order of Krishna. This is very important point. That order of Krishna comes through disciplic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master's order should be taken as the prime duty of life. If one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then one's perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed.
Yes. So here Krishna is telling Arjuna, Chetasa sarva karmani. So in all kinds of activities, Chetasa, the intelligence, you engage the intelligence, Mai sanyasya mat paraha. So this is similar to the 261 verse also, where Krishna says, Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita mat paraha. Buddhi yogam upashritya. So taking shelter of me. Mat chitta, in consciousness of me, satatam bhava. So here, Krishna is telling him, so sarva karmani, you perform all activities. You perform all activities, But while performing all the activities, Matchitta, be in consciousness of me. So the acharyas explain that, so here Krishna is telling Arjuna that you're not qualified for Kevala Bhakti. So Kevala Bhakti means just what the Lord desires. But here Krishna is saying, okay, you do all your activities, Sarva Karmani, you do all your activities, but at the same time you think of me. So it is somewhat like 927. So what is 927?
Yat karoshi yadashnasi.
Yes. Yad karoshi, yadashnasi, yad juhoshi. So whatever activities you perform, but do it as an offering to me. Kurushva mad arpanam. Mad arpanam. So it is somewhat like that. So you perform all your activities, but do in the consciousness of me. This seems to be a little higher level than that, because there Krishna says, okay, you do the activities and then you offer it to me. But here Krishna says, okay, even while doing the activity, you be in consciousness of me. You think about me and engage your intelligence in me. So it seems to be a little higher level than that. But in any case, so Krishna is telling Arjuna, again, something similar, that you perform your duties, but at the same time, you think of me. And so once again, he is inspiring him to fight, but while fighting in consciousness of him. So also like tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yuddhacha. So something similar to that, Krishna is telling here as a direct instruction to Arjuna that you perform your activities, but you think of me while performing your activities. So that's the instruction which Krishna is giving Arjuna. Of course, Srila Prabhupada is giving a totally devotional commentary of how one must act according to what Krishna desires, coming from the bona fide spiritual master. Okay, fine. So, okay, so I think so we can, our time is up for today. So we'll stop here today. And so we'll try to finish the rest of the chapter tomorrow, okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Finish the 18th chapter.
Okay. We have 4 questions. We'll take those. I'll post them tomorrow.
Yes, we can do.
Okay.
Fine, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much,
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.